Continued snow for the upper Midwest and eventually Northeast, and by early next week we might have an ice storm for the Northeast and some severe weather for the Southern Plains. Good morning, I'm meteorologist Pew. It's February 28, 2026. So continuing from last night, we are still having some snow in places like Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, and eventually to the Northeast. And we're going to see most of the snow accumulation occur in places like Dakotas and Minnesota, where we're looking at about 4 inches and 8 inches in more severe cases. But the total amount of snow accumulation in places like Wisconsin and Michigan are not going to be that much, maybe about like 1 to 2 inches. And then to the Northeast, we may see about like half an inch to maybe an inch. And so for the Midwest today, this is already happening as of this morning. Michigan, you'll probably get this by this afternoon. And then by the Northeast, you're going to get this snow really late tonight into tomorrow morning. So why this is all happening, if we look at 500 millibars on the eastern side of Canada, we have a really elongated trough. And that's one of the main reasons why we're having a really strong surface low pressure over here. And with that, it's bringing a lot of vorticity or spin into areas that it's headed into, and that helps with the upward motion. But behind it, we're going to have a negative vorticity advection. And essentially what that means is we're having the opposite effect. So instead of upward motion, we have more downward motion. So this is why we're going to have a really strong surface high pressure that came from the Alberta area and it's slowly traveling to the Northeast. So with high pressure being associated with more downward motion, we're having winds going both away from the high pressure and going clockwise. Now, if we go a little bit above the surface at 850 millibars in the Southern Plains, we do have a little bit of a shortwave trough. And with that, we have a little bit of a surface pressure as well. Now, this low level low pressure is not that strong, but it's significant enough where it's producing that counterclockwise flow and producing a lot of southerly winds more north, bringing that warm air advection into the cold air, with that high pressure bringing more winds from the north. And at the same time, this low level low pressure did originate from the British Columbia area and brought in some moisture from the Pacific. And so with all that combined, this is why we're having a very thin line of snow occurring from the Midwest and eventually to the Northeast. This low level low pressure is also one of the reasons why we may see some isolated thunderstorms in the Southern Plains today. Not related, but very similar. We're having this high pressure low pressure dynamic happening in South Florida in this moment too, where we have a high pressure in the Southeast and a low pressure in South Florida. And with that combined, we are having some isolated thunderstorms today where we may see some hail or wind. And most of that risk is going to happen around this late afternoon. Now, speaking of isolated thunderstorms, going to the Pacific Northwest in places like Oregon, Northern California, Northern Nevada, and Utah, we are having some risk for isolated thunderstorms. And this is because looking back at 500 millibars, we do have a little bit of a shortwave trough that is coming through, and one, that's bringing in some moisture, but two, it's bringing in some vorticity and a little bit of some shear. And this trough is going to be specific because once it travels eastward into the US, we are going to have a surface low pressure that's going to develop in the eastern Rockies and Southern Plains by early next week. And when that happens, as this high pressure that we're seeing right now in the northern plains start moving to the east, we're going to have that low pressure high pressure dynamic again, and it's going to cause an ice storm, possibly mostly in Pennsylvania. And the Weather Prediction Center did issue some high confidence by Tuesday we're going to see this ice storm. And by Wednesday, the Storm Prediction Center did issue a 15% chance to see some severe weather for the Southern Plains.